going on, everybody? You're listening to the Justin Lascek podcast, and I'm that dude, Justin. Welcome to the show. Shout out to Bobby Emmett for the intro song. He's Sturgill Simpson's keyboard player. I'm actually recording this in a hotel room while we're on tour with them. Anyway, I'm glad you're here because we're going to have a lot of fun. And that's not innuendo at all, at least this time. Anyway, this introductory episode will introduce my background and the intent behind this show. I'm a United States Special Forces soldier, otherwise known as a Green Beret. Despite referring to ourselves as quiet professionals, I went overt about the job after I stepped on an IED in early 2019. The blast blew my lower legs and testicles off, and I've used social media as a platform to support a benevolent organization called the Special Forces Foundation. They take care of wounded Green Berets as well as Gold Star families, those left behind when their loved one is killed in action. I also use social media to vulnerably portray emotional and mental health challenges to provide understanding and battle against the societal stigma, and also reach out to others who are suffering. Believe me, I understand your challenges and have the utmost compassion for anyone who's struggling. Through all my writing, poetry, podcasting, and speaking, I hope to influence us to take care of ourselves. You can find me on Instagram at justin.lascek, Lascek. Before getting into anything else, some specific and general disclaimers that apply to any episode for the show. I will never represent the DoD, the Department of Defense, in any capacity, ever. I will never say things that get a rise out of you, the listener, in order to make a cheap news story from my position and circumstance. I also have a bit of a unique background that can label me as an authority on certain topics. And this doesn't mean I'll never be wrong, and I'll do my best to clarify objectivity versus subjectivity, and include the sum of my personal experiences when I make a point. And that also means you may not agree with everything that I say, which is good, and I encourage you to stick around if that's the case. This podcast is modeled on the long conversation format where we avoid the classic news channel sound bites and get to explore a variety of topics in depth. And this is my forum to help teach, but my primary intent is to learn. I'll do this by finding people with unique viewpoints and the smartest people in their field, and I'll interview them to challenge my opinions or generally accepted facts and digest them into learnable concepts. I believe we can learn something from everyone, even if their general thesis or paradigm of thinking differs from our own. And I'll also look at the human aspect of their experience with compassion and explore, when they're willing, how they overcame challenges in their life. I have unique friends in a variety of fields as well as verbal confirmations from great people to participate in this show. My background will likely come out fully in future episodes, but generally it started with a degree in exercise physiology and a significant involvement in strength and conditioning, fitness, wellness, and a dabbling in mental performance. In 2009, I started my second company called 70s Big that it's mostly comprised of silly entertainment in order to keep people around to learn about lifting weights, being strong, and a satirical view of masculinity. And I wrote an article nearly every weekday for 4 years on topics like anatomy and physiology, mobility, nutrition, mechanics, rehabilitation, mindset, and a special focus on the inclusion of women in the realm of strength training. Through this website, I traveled across the U.S. and some parts of the world teaching seminars on these topics. I also wrote a handful of books. A couple were about an intermediate lifting program I expanded on called the Texas Method. And that's good for people who've completed a novice-based linear progression and are ready for a consistent weekly schedule. The second book is a continuation into the advanced realm called the Texas Method Advanced. And I wrote a book with Dr. Lon Kilgore and Dr. Michael Hartman called Fit. Specifically, I wrote the programming chapter, which has a huge emphasis on how to program endurance and conditioning workouts instead of randomly doing nonsense. That chapter is roughly 26,000 words and almost the length of some of the other books I wrote. I released a nutrition book called Paleo for Lifters a couple days before I left for basic training. And that takes the outline of the paleo diet and applies it to different body types of lifters. It's not focused on counting calories or macros and tries to instill good habits and behaviors instead. I wrote another book and released it right before I went to SEER while I was in the Q course. That's the Special Forces Qualification course. And that book's called the 70s Big LP. A linear progression is usually a simple strength program with basic barbell movements to develop strength. But some linear progressions neglect the development of the upper body or arms, so I included some of those movements into a simple program that would do more than grow a set of hot buns and legs. You can find the ebooks on the relatively dormant website 70sbig.com, and Fit is available on Amazon. The reason 70s Big became dormant is because I enlisted in the Army in the beginning of 2013. Roughly 3 years later, I graduated as a Green Beret. It took that long because Special Forces medics, known by the military occupation specialty nomenclature as the 18 Delta, must go through an additional 9-month medical course on top of the Special Forces qualification course. As a member of an Operational Detachment Alpha, which is a Special Forces team called an ODA, I prepared for and participated in 2 combat deployments to Afghanistan. During the first deployment, I was fortunate to participate in a fair amount of combat in a different context to how SF teams currently operate. I was in a variety of types of firefights, I kicked more doors than I should have, treated casualties, and legitimately had some extreme close calls that could have resulted in significant wounds or death. And I say this not because I think I'm cool or tough, but because oftentimes people will claim some kind of combat experience and it's a total embellishment of the truth. That being said, there are fine men and women who have been in much more combat or treated many more casualties than I have. You'll never know about or hear from some of these people, and I hope when I share my stories, it informs the general public of one individual's experience so we can appreciate all combat veterans' experiences. Now, I liked combat, but I'll never talk about it to fluff my ego or to participate in a figurative dick measuring contest, because trust me, there are tons of hard-ass motherfuckers who survive much more combat than I have. Which brings me to my next point. The totality of war experience is abnormal. They're literally insane. War is much more than life amplified, and for those of us who conduct it, it takes a significant toll. There's a stigma that exists in society, the military, and even our units about the mental and emotional challenges we face, especially from combat. Whatever your opinion on foreign policy and war, there are very real consequences from war. I've lost friends from being killed in action or when they took their own lives. And I am and always will be a voice for being vulnerably open about these consequences and paving a way for improved acceptance and rehabilitation. The stigma associated with mental health means nobody really talks about it. I do, and I will, because it's easy to feel alone with a dark mind and a troubled heart, but I hear and see you all, and we can get through this. On my second deployment, I stepped on an IED. It immediately blew my left leg off and burned and blasted most of my right leg nearly to the bone. And that right leg would eventually be amputated too. My testicles were blown off, almost died pretty hard, yet my brothers, my teammates, they implemented the lessons I taught them about trauma medicine, patient movement, and medevac procedures. Before receiving ketamine, I also gave instructions on how I should be treated, but because of their effort on the ground, an efficient medevac crew, and skilled and motivated surgical teams, I survived. Barely. Maybe belligerently. I don't know. But since then, I've been on a long and tortured road of recovery physically and emotionally, and such is the life of an amputee and PTSD. Experiencing significant traumatic events are always challenging. With a history of depression and emotional trauma, I've had to put in work every day to learn and improve. And much of what I have learned, not only from dealing with extreme circumstances in combat, but the aftermath, will be discussed and taught here. Experiences like this make you question everything, including the purpose of everything. And I or we will never have all the answers, but I do know we can find our purpose in our suffering. And I believe learning, teaching, and sharing through this podcast is part of my purpose. I've been teaching for as long as I can remember. I'd help underclassmen with football or lifting weights while I was in high school. I became a personal trainer before getting fired for having diarrhea and skipping mandatory aerobics classes. Well, maybe we'll get into that later sometime. Taught classes during a brief stint in grad school, including a class called Psychology of Success. I opened a CrossFit gym and taught all that. Then I moved to Texas and worked for and with Mark Ripito during the end of the CrossFit barbell seminars and the early days of the starting strength seminars. And I've coached, 250,000 squats, like legitimately. Then I became a Green Beret, and at the core of everything, a Green Beret is a teacher. We cross-train each other all the time, and I've taught trauma medicine to SF guys, U.S. infantry personnel, overseas contractors, and all kinds of different Afghans. I learn and synthesize new information all the time, and I like to help other people improve aspects of their life while at the same time not getting butthurt if they don't listen to me. And I say all this because it's a big part of my life, and I hope that you get something out of each of these episodes. And I'm grateful for all the fine people who have played a role in my recovery and progress, especially to my family and friends that I've developed a deeper love for since almost dying. And love and compassion will be central themes in this show because at the core of everything is our love and compassion for ourselves and others. And since I've just been talking about myself, I'd like to give you some take-home points of things you can actually do. I have a working model of emotional health, and taking care of and loving the self is a priority in order to cultivate connection with other people and have better success. We call the fundamentals the pillars of emotional health, and they are introspection, communication, empathy, and self-love. There's a whole lot more, but these are the pillars that hold everything up. The ability to practice and consider personal feelings and needs, communicate them, understand others' feelings and needs, and love and take care of the self are the foundation for connection and a fulfilling life. In order to learn these concepts, I have 3 100% books, and these are books that I think 100% of people should read. And I think they're valuable, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. The first is Dr. Marshall Rosenberg's Nonviolent Communication, which provides a model for communicating in conflict, but also for self-assessment and understanding others. This book doesn't teach it deliberately, but it covers introspection, communication, and empathy all in one. The second book is Brené Brown's The Gifts of Imperfection, which is a guidebook on cultivating self-worthiness and compassion and had a significant impact on my life in 2019 after the blast. The third book is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Frankl survived Auschwitz and wrote about his experience, but the second half of the book gets into his psychotherapeutic approach called logotherapy. Viktor's philosophy is that you can find meaning in your life, and it shifts over time, and it can be meaning in your work, meaning in love, like a romantic relationship or family, and meaning in the face of unavoidable suffering. And fuck, I know that one pretty well. But reading Frankl's work can help with improving our perspective or perceptions of the situations we find ourselves in. Generally, I would recommend reading these books in that order: Nonviolent Communication, The Gifts of Imperfection, and then Man's Search for Meaning. But if you've self-assessed a particular deficiency, then start wherever you'd like. I have one more category of actionable things you can do for yourself, and I won't fully get into each one, but there are 3 beneficial things that have huge impacts on everything else in life. They are sleeping, journaling, and meditating. And I've spent an abnormal amount of time researching neuropsychology and sleep, and my emotions are directly correlated with sleep. And briefly, some things you can do right now to improve sleep are use a red filter on your phone after 8 p.m. or so, dim the lights in the house as the night goes on, and manage your time to have a 9-hour sleep window. And I like to say nothing is more important than sleep, and creating habits to make sleep better is in our best interest. We'll talk about this more later. And the next thing is journaling. And it's an excellent practice of deliberate introspection. And the only comparable thing you can do is counseling. But if you currently don't like counseling or you can't afford it, journaling is a good start. You can use the previously mentioned books as journal prompts. And you can just merely highlight things you want to explore and use it as a prompt when you're writing. But be kind to yourself and always ask why. What are your feelings and why? What are you grateful for and why? And lastly, the third thing is meditating. And it's a critical daily task that can be done anywhere from 1 to 20 minutes. And most of you can't sit still or can't turn your brain off. And it's because your brain and body have adapted to near constant abuse of crazy activity, primarily from your cell phone. And I want to get into a complete dissertation, so I'll just ask, do you think looking at your phone constantly is good for you? Or did we evolve to do so? How nice would it be to put down the phone for like a few minutes a day, close your eyes and breathe deeply? Deep breathing has beneficial physiological effects that linger for hours, and you can't turn your brain off because that only really happens when you're fucking dead. So the victory of meditating is not to turn your thoughts off. It's to recognize that you're actually thinking and return the focus to the breath or whatever the object of focus is. And you may do it 100 times in a session, but that's the point. I've been meditating regularly since 2015, and there are many fantastic apps out there. The apps have free sessions, or you can just find some free stuff on YouTube. And you won't have immediate success as far as how you define it, because your success is framed around this idea that you're going to be in this Zen-like mindless state. But a lack of immediate success is true of literally anything in life anyway, so don't apply that shitty argument to this. So generally, I just threw a bunch of stuff at you with 3 books and 3 tasks that you can maybe start implementing into your life. So you may either think they're great ideas, or you're irritated that I'm telling you how to live, or you're glad for the advice but have a hard time implementing them. And if that's the case, just please remember that no matter what, today you are still worthy of your own love, even if you don't do anything. And you aren't defined by the application of new or healthier habits. I mean, I've never had anyone report back to me that after doing any of these things that it had a negative impact on them, but just go easy on yourself in the meantime. And I've covered a variety of topics so far. If you're into this kind of stuff, then keep on listening. And we'll talk about combat, medicine, love, music, philosophy, extremes of the human experience, and everything in between. My goal is not just to sit here and tell you how to live. I would hate that if anyone did that to me. So it's instead to cultivate critical thinking and compassion. And I also hope to find some amazing intellectuals to interview, and I'm excited for such an opportunity. And one more note, I'm doing all this by myself right now. I have some okay microphones, and I'm recording and mixing all this on my own. And I barely know what I'm doing, and I don't really care to find out how to be an expert in any of this. So I won't be editing any of the conversations unless the guests and I get into like a slippery wrestling match or something. And I'll work out the kinks along the way, and I'll likely fail a time or two, but that's kind of what I do in life. And I'll get better as we go, so thanks for your patience. And I appreciate you stopping by, and I look forward to sharing this journey with you on the Justin Lascek podcast. So take care of yourselves, put one foot in front of the other, even if you ain't got any.